Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Pål and Ville. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello, dear friends and fellow followers of the turbulent world of fintech. Welcome back to another episode of Fintech Daydreaming. This will be our last episode for season 8. This will be our last episode for 2023, as Ville and I will wind down now for the festive season, celebrating some joyful time with friends, loved ones, and potentially some other close fintech fans. Let's see what happens between now and early January. But as always, I'm Pål. I will be your host for this episode, but I could not do this at all without my good, close, fantastic friend, Ville. And Ville, are you starting to feel that Christmas spirit?
I am. Is it a cliche to say that this year has gone really fast? Or is it just a sign of how old I am right now? Because it really seems like 23 went past like in a snap.
It is signs of your age. As we get older, time gets sped up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It
does. So,
yeah.
But again, in the world of fintech and the way we've been doing this, especially this season now, it feels like it really went faster than usual. So maybe we're going to repeat the same cliche 1 year from now when we do the wrap up for 24. That wow, it really went faster than 23. But I guess that's the sign of the age.
But I think one of the things that I've noticed, you say that it's gone very fast. I've noticed in the process of finding our guests and lining up the guests and everything else that we do around that, it has been halved because we've started doing these Nordic fintech highlights with Helsinki Fintech Farm, and it has in some level shortened everything for us. It's half the number of guests we've had, and so from that perspective, it does feel like it's gone faster, right?
Yeah, it does. And again, a big part of the of doing this podcast is finding the interesting guests that we have and arranging for the recording times and all of that stuff. So when you take half of that out of the season in a way, because arranging things between Janne, yourself and me is much easier than the global guest, especially in different time zones. So all of that admin stuff is halved. So I'm sure that actually has made this season feel shorter than before. But I personally enjoy a lot our Nordic fintech highlight episodes. They are a lot of fun because it gives us a chance to reflect on the Nordic fintechs and gives us a chance to maybe give our own opinions more than we usually do in the normal guest episodes. And it gives a nice balance, right? So it's every other episode is the normal Fintech Daydreaming episode with our fantastic guests. And then every other episode is more about us talking about the recent news. I think having both sides represented now in this season has felt like a good balance. Of course, we're really interested to hear from the audience as well. I mean, we do this for you, so we would like to hear feedback from you as well, and see whether we should continue to have these news episodes, whether we should have more of them, less of them. Please tell us. I think that would be the number one indicator whether we're doing a good job or not.
I definitely don't think we should have more of them. I think we've got a fantastically good balance at the moment where we pivot backs and forwards between the episodes from fantastic guests to our perspective on news, etc. So I think we've got a good balance. Let's, obviously, if our listeners out there says, don't bring us any more fintech news, then we might have to reconsider that. But I don't think we're going to hear that. So, and for today, I need to apologize. I'm not in my usual studio. I'm in a square white box, more commonly referred to as an office, and doing my day job for today. So, unlike you, who's for once in your home studio, I am not in my home studio this time, so sorry for echo, sorry for background noise, sorry for the cars on the street out here and everything else. But we have to earn our living somehow. It's not just podcasting.
Yeah, and again, it's usually me sitting in a meeting room somewhere around the world, and this time it's you. So it's good to have the roles reversed every now and then at least. And
Yes.
you're right. So as you said, we do this podcast as almost like a hobby. We love fintech, and that's why we're doing this. But at the same time, we also have to earn our living. So
Yeah.
going into offices is a thing we have to do. It's not on the side, but again, a big part of our day-to-day work, of course.
But talking about the podcast, I've one of the channels that we post onto all the episodes is Spotify, right, along with Apple Podcast and YouTube and everything else. And I've actually downloaded some statistics for the year 2023. So
Okay.
For us, that is season 7 and season 8 combined. But some really interesting statistics that I'd like to share with you. It demonstrates that although sometimes it might seem invisible to us, we are growing. We are getting more listeners, and we're expanding on an ongoing basis, which it fills me with a warm heart, because at least then I know there are people out there listening to us. We're not just rambling into a dark, black void where no one is listening to us. I mean, there are people out there. And so just to give you some perspective to share with you, during 2023, our growth has been an increase of 57% in listeners.
Wow.
22% in growth in streams, and a 38% growth in followers. And this is only on Spotify, right? Which I think is fantastic, because then we need to somehow try and see if we can create an aggregate of all of our different platforms. But just looking at Spotify, I think that is, fantastic. And I can also say some other things that for 30 of our followers on Spotify, we are ranked as their top 1 podcast.
Wow.
And you 30 followers out there that believe that Fintech Daydreaming is your number 1 podcast on Spotify, we love you.
Yeah,
we
love you.
Absolutely adore you. Thank you very, very much. I mean, that's fantastic. And out of all of our followers, 130 of them see us as being in their top 10 of podcasts on Spotify. Again, fantastic. Another thing that I think is really interesting is looking at the geographical location of our listeners, right? And I always thought that we are in Finland. We talk a lot about Finnish fintech news. We are partnered with Helsinki Fintech Farm. I always assumed that our major listener base was based in Finland, but that's not actually the case. With Spotify, our largest audience are based in Sweden.
Wow.
Yeah. After Sweden, in the second comes UK.
Did not see that come.
Then comes Finland. So Finland is third, followed by Denmark, and then this one really threw me. The 5th position of regions of listeners, Australia. So I can understand we've got a large proportion of listeners that are in the Nordics. I mean, UK as number 2, fantastic. Remember, this is Spotify again, right? So we're talking about specifically Spotify. But Australia, that is fantastic. Guys in Australia that are following and listening to us, again, thank you. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. So that's just, some interesting statistics. I can also say to you that, and I don't think you will be shocked when you hear this. In actual fact, let me do it as a question. Can you guess what was our top episode for 2023? And I'll tell you that this episode was streamed 641% more than any of our other episodes on average.
So that is an interesting question. The my best guess would be maybe the first episode of season 8 with Kelvin. Was that
No,
it?
no.
Okay.
But you're sort of you're slanting in the right direction. Remember, we're talking 2023, so we're talking both season 7 and season 8. Not that I'm trying to guide you in any way.
Okay, then of course we did the live episode in Vienna, which was season 7, episode 5, I think. I think that that could be one as well, maybe.
Nope.
Okay, then my last guess, and then you're gonna have to tell me. It would be season 7, episode 3, with SEB embedded and Christopher.
Yes. Yep.
There we go.
So our episode with Christopher Malmer from SEB Embedded was our top episode on Spotify for 2023. And like I said, I mean, it streamed 641% more than our average episodes to date, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Another episode which was shared the most. So this is not listened to, but actually shared. And when we're talking about sharing, we're talking Spotify will recognize direct link, WhatsApp sharing, text message sharing, and Instagram sharing. And the one that was shared the most, so therefore distributed to other people, was Cloud Exit with David Hansen.
Ah, okay.
So that one sparked an awful lot of interest, and lots of people wanted to share that episode with their network and colleagues and friends. But it wasn't the one that was listened to the most. That was SEB.
Yeah. The Cloud Exit episode was actually quite interesting. We at this time, at least I had a lot of conversations relating to public cloud deployments and possible reconsideration of cloud strategies around my work. And I for one shared that episode to a few of my colleagues, so I can totally understand that maybe others did as well. So makes a perfect sense.
Yes, absolutely. Although I've got to admit, I'm I'm so passionate. I share every single episode in as many places as possible, as we all know. So,
I do too. But for this episode specifically, I actually, in work context, I said that, look, we're having a discussion about this. We had this exact same discussion in my podcast, so you might want to check it out. So I did some few extra shares maybe for that episode.
Yeah. So which one has been your favorite episode of season 8?
Oh, so many. But just for the experience and the kind of liveliness and fun of the episode, it was the live episode in Vienna. That was season 7, my favorite episode. But season 8, I gotta say, it was one with Sanjit on the platform revolution. That was very, in a fun way, geeky episode. Got to kind of go into very much theories of platform strategies and the how do you construct a narrative around the platform, and how does that relate to financial services. It went a little bit theoretical, but I felt like in a good way. So, and we also got a bunch of good feedback in socials on the conversation that we had. Also in person feedback that I've listened to, I've heard in a couple of conferences, for instance. So that's gotta be my highlight for season 8. But overall, if we wrap up 23 altogether, it's still the Vienna episode that takes the cake.
I've got to admit, the Vienna episode was fun to do. It was great to be at the Moby Forum and to interact with everybody there. If I was to look at generally across 2028, the SEB Embedded episode was a good one. But I agree with you. I mean, for me personally, and more from I've read the book twice. I really resonate with what Sanjit is saying. You know that I have a fundamental belief that the future of banking will be dominated by platforms. So having that discussion was fantastic. And it's actually, I've had some interesting discussions on the back of that, predominantly on LinkedIn, where I've ended up in deep dive discussions with other, can I say, industry thinkers around the core business model of banks. and it's ended up in a I won't say a heated debate. I will say it's ended up in a very interesting discussion where I'm stating that we're seeing a transition of banking business models. What I'm saying is that yes, traditional banking business models still exist. Some banks will continue to go in that direction, but we're seeing smart banks starting to create a hybrid of platform business models merged with traditional banking models, which is creating a new business model for banks. I've had discussions with we can call them industry thought leaders that are adamantly disagreeing with me. And it's fantastic when you end up in having to not only position your point of view, but argue it. Because the minute you have to argue your point of view, it forces you to really think about what you're trying to say. And after having gone through that journey, I can actually say even strongly, I think we are seeing the emergence of a new business model for banks.
Yeah. But we also have to remember that there are many kinds of banks, and the typical bank that we think about first when somebody says a bank is one of the incumbent banks. That's of course a generational question, and of course you will have different answers from different age groups. But for us, it is really the big name banks, the ones you see on the street that you still have a few branch offices here and there. They have TV ads. Its hybrid approach is interesting and absolutely relevant, especially for these incumbent banks, because again, they're not only serving a single customer segment in the way, for example, these new digital-only banks are doing. They are serving the entire spectrum of age groups, customers in the countries where they're operational. And this also means that they need to have a very versatile set of business models and distribution models for their products in the future. They cannot stick with the old ways, that is true, but they also cannot pivot fully into the platform or embedded finance world. So they have to keep everything at hand at the same time in a different way than these more niche players are doing in the fintech space. So that's why when we talk about banks will become platforms, everybody needs to do embedded finance, that is also at the same time true and not true, because again, it's a wide spectrum of customer groups that they need to serve. But again, all of this is just to support the conversations around different models and the way to evolve as people find new ways of consuming financial services.
No, I agree. I think we're both saying the same thing. But that's not surprising. We tend to agree on most things anyway, right? So
yeah, we aggressively agree.
Aggressively agree. Yes, aggressively agree. Yes, but I also think there's. I mean, not laboring on the platform. We're going to go geeky again, aren't we? Not laboring on the platform discussion too much. I also think there is, and I think we discussed this at length with Sangeet on the episode. There are geographical differences, dependent upon the culture, how mature the banking market is, how many unbanked or underbanked individuals you've got in your society, etc. So when you look at the Nordics, and I don't want to be derogatory towards our large Nordic banks, but I think particularly in the Nordics, the banks are still sitting on their laurels, right? They're comfortable. They believe that there's not going to be that big a change, and they still have a inside out perspective that they're going to own and manage the full customer journey going forwards. And I'm wondering how long that is going to be the status quo in the Nordics.
I agree and I disagree in a way, because one of the reasons, if you look at, we've started to pivot towards the trends of that we see for next year, is that the banks are feeling a little bit overwhelmed at the moment, especially in Europe, with regards to the new regulation that's coming. We have the instant payment regulation coming. We have the new EU digital identity wallets arriving. We have the digital euros starting to ramp up in Europe, along with other central bank digital currency initiatives in the countries that don't use euro. So there's a lot, and then we have, of course, the usual things, PSD3, we have the AI regulation that has a heavy impact on the financial industry, and then we have the usual things with the Data Privacy Act and the equal access elements of the upcoming regulation. All of this translates to massive pressure on regulated banks that actually have to obey the laws in the countries where they operate. And banks are feeling at the moment that please don't come and tell us about new stuff right now. We actually have to comply with all this new stuff. And at the same time, try to figure out how can they turn that regulatory compliance into benefit instead of a tax on operational capabilities in the countries where they are. And I think that's going to be kind of concluding on the point. The narrative for 24 is going to be really about how to turn mandatory regulation into a positive thing inside these banks, and the innovation and the movement forward on the new distribution models and the new ways to serve the customers is going to be based on this new regulation, I believe. So I think we're going to see a lot of discussion around the different banks and the way they are approaching these new mandatory requirements from the supervisors. Yeah. If I have to pick one theme, that's mine for 24.
Yeah, no, I again, violently agree with you, but I also think that banks, they don't have the luxury of freezing everything else because there is too much change in the world anyway, right? So yes, I agree they have to focus on the regulatory elements, but not at the detriment of everything else that they have to do. So I agree with you. They're overloaded. They're drowning in too many variables and uncertainty. So, but let's go through our episodes of season 8. Why not?
Sure. Yeah.
And very quickly, our point of view. I think, if I'm honest, let's avoid the Nordic FinTech highlight episodes. I think we've done those, but yeah, if we look at where we started, like you said, we started with Kelvin Tan, right?
Yep.
Looking at Audax. Banking as a service was our core focus there. I thought that was a really fantastically good discussion. I think we have explored banking as a service, embedded finance quite substantially on the podcast. But I think going forwards, we're going to continue to see an explosion of banking as a service, banking as a platform, and embedded finance. But I also think, back to what you were saying around regulations, I think we're going to start seeing the regulators getting concerned about the explosive growth of all of these providers because it creates third-party risk, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a potential shrinkage as well, and a potential number of mergers and acquisitions of these platforms, driven predominantly by regulation, maybe.
Absolutely. So my reflection on the Kelvin episode, again, it was really interesting to talk with somebody who has basically spun out from an incumbent bank to set up a separate operation for banking as a service, not only to provide it as a service, but as a technology platform. And on top of that, building it in-house. So they're not buying a vendor platform for doing this. They are building it in-house. They are working like a fintech with a legacy or heritage of an incumbent bank. So I really enjoyed that discussion, and I really appreciate what Kelvin is doing with his team. Now, that being said, the banking as a service space has really been exploding in the past couple of years, as we've seen. And I again completely agree with your point. I think what we're going to see in 24 is the kind of coming of an age part of the banking as a service story. There's a lot of things that have gone wrong. There's way too many companies in this space. We're going to see consolidation. We're going to see a lot of these banking and service providers, the smaller ones in particular, going out of business. But that's kind of a normal evolution of a segment, I think. And I think it's all for the better for us consumers, because as we get more stability and maturity here, there's also less risk in the market, and that's what the supervisors also want to see. We've seen this regulatory action coming to force very where news like the one that happened with tax ended up taxing that fintech financial service provider customers in the US due to the regulatory action that they got for risks around these new fintechs that they had onboarded very aggressively. So I think that's going to be another theme, reducing the risk in the market by consolidation and stricter regulation. So again, we agree.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what impact PSD3 and the payment service regulation will have on this space as well. I think it's going to impact some of the banking as a service, embedded banking, open banking, all of this space as well. So, which actually leads us to the next episode, right? Because we had a discussion with Sudeep Khan from Raiffeisen Bank around open banking, and particularly the culture that they've got for driving open banking. I thought that was another fantastically good episode.
Yeah, I mean, we met Sudeep, and we saw Sudeep actually in Vienna doing a presentation around embedded finance for the way banks are approaching it, and we enjoyed so much that presentation and the follow-up conversations with Sudeep that we invited him to be a guest on the episode. And yeah, again, he's a great guest, and I encourage everybody who, if you ever see him on the agenda of any conference or seminar, go check him out. He has a lot of very good things to say, and you will learn a lot just listening. Yeah. So, but on the point of what Sudeep also talked a lot about is this invisible banking, and there's one more regulatory thing that's going to be happening during next year, which is that European PSPs are going to have direct access to clearing. So this means that, especially when you mentioned PSD3 and the PSD2, all the kind of strong customer authentication types of things and the related, let's say, friction when it comes to applying open banking APIs or otherwise from banks is going to reduce, because again, as PSPs have direct clearing access, they will no longer need commercial banks between them and the clearing infrastructure. So I think this is going to be interesting development, and we'll see how that will impact the position of commercial banks when it comes to payment processing.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the next discussion we had was with Marcus Ivarsson from Ting. I've got a real passion for financial literacy, right? Predominantly because I've got kids, but I think that the world is so complex these days. Financial management is so complex. We're drowning in choice. So I thought we've had this discussion before. We've had other guests talking around financial literacy, talking particularly around how do you use apps, gamification, technology to help children to understand money management. So another fantastic discussion. I think we should cover this more often.
Oh yes, and we will continue to follow this track, of course, during our next season. But I gotta say that episode with Ching was actually one of my favorites as well, because I think it's one of the episodes that I had the most discussions about afterwards with my friends and peers and fans. We have fans really. Because it's such a new way of looking at things. They don't have a financial license. They don't have an e-money license. They don't do direct integration to banks. But they have built this gamification element on top of this financial inclusion and financial education, and I think that's admirable. It's a new way of looking at things. It's a new way of involving new generations into this system, and I think they have a really interesting future ahead of them if they're able to figure out the business case and the growth path at the moment. But beyond that, I really applaud what they're doing there.
Absolutely. I think there's a fine line that has to be walked between gamification for the right reasons and gamification for profit generation. And I think, King is taking the right path there. And I think I applaud any fintech who understands how to do it right, rather than just, lining the pockets of the investors. Next, we had Paul Staples Another fantastic discussion again, talking about beyond banking, but back on that trend of embedded finance, platformification of the banking industry. I thought that was another very good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, Paul is from Clearbank, and we steered away from the history of Clearbank as such, and really focused on the actual service and the embedded finance components and the growth of embedded finance, especially in the corporate world. And I encourage listen to that. Paul knows what he's talking about, and I think it's a great way, especially for banks, to look at the corporate segment and understand the value of embedded services within those environments. So basically B2B supply chain, basic treasury management, cash management use cases. If you're able to have those integrations done in an efficient way, then the growth in that segment, which has been very stagnant for a very long time, is guaranteed. So I think the listen and learn is what I'd say.
There's a parallel trend here that we've discussed in the past as well and seen, and that's back to open banking and the drive of open banking, where most banks have seen predominant benefits of open banking more in the corporate banking space rather than in the retail banking space. So you can see a parallel there to what Clearbank is doing.
Absolutely. And we're going to see, by the way, a new element into this discussion fairly soon, which is that central bank digital currencies have been, especially in Europe, have been really focused on the retail element, again, providing citizens with access to central bank money in a digital form. But I really think the big use cases, the big benefits of central bank digital currencies are in the wholesale segment. So I think this CBDC conversation will enter its next stage with regards to wholesale and B2B elements, which is also linking into the embedded finance, corporate embedded finance in a very tangible way. So yeah, that's going to be another fun discussion we're going to have next season and next year.
I think we're going to have an awful lot of discussions around central bank digital currency next year, because it's going to continue to grow. And I think we've had discussions around this before. One of the key interesting areas is going to be machine-to-machine payments, right, when it comes to central bank digital currency. So that sort of rounds us off. We've already discussed the fantastic episode with Sangeet. Mm-hmm. A number of peppered episodes around Nordic fintech news with Janna. Mm-hmm. I think that's it. That was our season 8. It was a fantastic journey. I think we've had some great discussions, and I look forward to future discussions. I still can't believe we're on season 8. We're closing out season 8 of this podcast. Something we started as a whimsical, how about we just record some of our discussions, and look where we are now. Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
I just recently got this Facebook. This happened X years ago when I posted about our first episode. I was like, that was so many years ago. Oh my God. So yeah, it's time has really gone fast. Not only this year, this season, but ever since we started. It's been such a fun experience that I hope our audience has enjoyed it as well, seeing us grow.
Absolutely. And talking of fun, we can't miss out our usual traditional good but bad joke. And as I've got the pleasure of hosting us today, you've got the pleasure of joking us today.
Oh, cool. So not sure about the fun part as usual, but again, I do have a joke. It's fintech related, and even with a Christmas theme. So I think this will be appropriate way of heading us towards the holiday season with a fintech spirit. So here we go. So why did the cryptocurrency investor ask Santa for a hardware wallet for Christmas?
I have no idea, but I'm sure you're going to tell us.
Because he wanted to slay the market.
Oh God! Yes. All right. I'll yes. Thank you. Thank you.
If I had a microphone, I would drop it now, but I don't. So
yeah, drop the mic, walk away, and leave the Christmas spirits alone. With that, dear friends, listeners, and loved ones, thank you for following us for season 8. Thank you for listening to this episode. Let us know which has been your favorite episode of season 8, or which has been your favorite episode of all of our episodes all the way up until now, end of season 8. Ville and I will be back in January. We will kick off with a Nordic FinTech highlights episode, where we, with Jana, will discuss what was hot, what was interesting, and what was exciting in the world of FinTech in the Nordics during December. Until we get to the end of the year, if you found this episode interesting, if you found anything that we've discussed interesting, please just share FinTech Daydreaming with 3 of your friends. Make it a Christmas treat for Ville and I. Give us that gift. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and share FinTech Daydreaming with 3 of your close friends, network, or colleagues that you think might find this interesting. We will be back in January. Until then, have a fantastic holiday and a splendid 2024. This has been FinTech Daydreaming.
This is FinTech Daydreaming.